Do you guys like my new shirt? I don't really like this color very much, but it matches my eyes. And you gotta keep it cute, You gotta bring out the features. The fit is a little awkward, but we'll get through this. Anyway, guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another video, a little story time, I guess we can call it. So right now everybody's talking about how the Supreme Court made this monumental decision for LGBT people, which is that it's basically now illegal to fire a person based on their sexual orientation. So everybody's talking about this, and I think it's because it's Pride Month, but also it's like a refreshing headline with all the negativity in the press that's been taking place basically since the start of this year, 2020, with the coronavirus, pandemic coverage, and all the police brutality stuff. It's like a refreshing thing to read, like, oh, justice prevails, right? But I have to say, well, first off, let me say, I was actually shocked that this wasn't law yet. Like, I just assumed that was already in the law book. So it's like crazy to think that something like this just is getting passed now in 2020. But of course, it's good news. It's great news. But I have to say, every time I read a headline like this, I kind of feel like bittersweet. And then I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but let me explain to you why I feel this way. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement is a great example of what I'm about to talk about, which is that, yeah, it's great when there's legal coverage, legal protection, but it doesn't actually mean that it's reflected in the culture. So of course, legal protection is the first step. But as we've seen with Black Lives Matter, Black people have been saying since the civil rights movement, despite the legal framework being changed and the end of segregation and all this stuff, it doesn't actually mean that the culture changes. Yeah, it's in the books, but it doesn't mean that people are actually applying the laws that they should be applying, right? So I was thinking about this last night, and I was in the bath, which is like my new coronavirus pandemic hobby, because you spend all this time indoors. But also I'm a runner, and they say that taking long baths after a run with Epsom salt is good for your muscles to decrease inflammation. So it's been like my new thing, right? So I'm in the bath last night thinking about this Supreme Court decision, and I was thinking about my experiences as a gay person in the workplace. And I started getting like angry thinking about things that I've experienced, things that I've seen, and thinking about like the hypocrisy of like, yeah, we're gay allies, and yeah, there's these, there's legal protection, but things that I've observed. So I want to share my experiences in this video as a gay person in the workplace. So 2 companies ago, I was at a company that was run by older white men, predominantly older white straight men, and in some ways, it very much was like a boys' club. And it's funny how like years later, we see things from a different lens. Like I remember this moment, this story I'm about to share really annoyed me at the time, but now it kills me even more because with all these conversations we're having, in the public dialogue, it frustrates me even more that I was like, ugh, and nobody was like having my back because some people weren't even like thinking on the wavelength of these discussions of Black Lives Matter and #MeToo and like gay rights and all this stuff. So at this company, I had a manager who was very much a typical white straight man, like in every sense of the word, like very stereotypical American white straight man. And I remember he was talking to me about like these random 80s action movies, and some of them probably were like classics that I just hadn't seen, but he named 2 or 3 movies that I hadn't seen, and he was like shocked that I hadn't seen them. And then we had a meeting a few minutes later with our team, and he felt the need to kind of like shame me in front of the team, and he was like, yeah, Kevin doesn't know anything about, he has no sense of popular culture because he doesn't know these 2 or 3 movies or whatever. And he was serious, like he was trying to make a point that like I'm so out of touch. And I remember being so mad, thinking like, these are your references, pop culture references, because that's your culture. And I don't expect him or anybody who's not gay to know about like gay culture. I don't expect him to know about my background as a French and Turkish person, like my French culture, Turkish culture. I don't assume that people will know about my culture. But yet, like, this was such a typical example of like a white straight man assuming that because that's his culture, that's everybody's culture, and that I should know what he knows, right? One of my coworkers, who is also a white straight man, in that moment, he felt the need to, I guess, defend me. And this says so much, again, about how the typical straight white man, how he thinks and how gay people are perceived. That he said something along the lines of like, yeah, but Kevin knows different pop culture. Like, he knows like what Beyonce's kids are named. That made me even angrier because I'm like, how dare you assume that because I'm gay, that's the stuff that I care about, what Beyonce's kids' names are. I don't care about Beyonce. I don't know what her kids' names are. I don't care. And it's so offensive it's just funny because it was like a double offense. The first one is a straight man assuming that his culture must be my culture, and if it's not, then I must be out of touch, even if he knows nothing about my culture or my upbringing and the fact that I didn't even grow up my entire childhood in America, and my culture at home was very different from like American culture. I learned English through immersion. I didn't learn from my parents teaching me. I didn't learn American culture from like movies that my parents showed me. I learned to assimilate through just like absorption of culture at school and that kind of thing. And then for this other guy to assume that because I'm gay, I care about things like, celebrity gossip or whatever, and like celebrity family dynamics. It was so offensive to me. And I just remember being so pissed in that moment. But like, I've had so many moments like that working as a professional in the workplace where I was like, don't let this get the best of you. Like, don't really speak about what you want to speak about, because what I really wanted to do was blow up in their faces and be like, fuck you for assuming that because that's your culture, that's my culture, that because I'm gay, this is what I know about, or whatever. Because I guess it's difficult to articulate those things without coming off defensive or like aggressive. But that moment really was so demonstrative for me of the experiences that I've had throughout the years working in the workplace in an office setting with straight white men. And so it's interesting because these laws get passed, and of course these laws are about more important stuff. It's about potentially losing your job because of being gay. Nothing like that has ever happened to me. But I think what's great about Black Lives Matter now is people are talking about, it's not always overt, like homophobia, racism, sexism. It's not always like somebody saying, oh, like, nice skirt, like I wish I could feel you up under there, or somebody being like, I don't want to work with a black person. That probably does happen here and there because dumb people say dumb things, but so much of it, and I would argue the bulk of it, it's like an iceberg. I think people see the tip and they assume that's all that's there, but really most bigotry, most ignorance, I think, is like the submerged part of the iceberg that people don't see, and so they don't pay attention to it, but it's in the nuances. The devil is in the details. Another example, at the same company, there's a guy who once told me to smile more. It's a nice day, like, you have a nice smile, you should smile more. And this is something that like women always talk about, right? Like, women always say that this is a thing men say to them. And I felt in that moment that if that guy thought that I was straight, because at that company I was like out, whatever, people knew that I was gay. I felt that if I wasn't gay and if he assumed that I was straight, he wouldn't have spoken to me that way. And I could be wrong. Maybe it has nothing to do with that. Maybe it's a personality thing. Maybe he says that to random guys. But I just have a hard time believing that straight men comfortably would say that to other straight men in the workplace. Again, this is something that I'm assuming, but I found that oftentimes straight men, especially white straight men, the way they interact with me, and I would love to hear other gay people watching if this is your experience. I feel that oftentimes they're like, oh yeah, I'm a gay ally, or like they have nothing against gay people, but they inherently build a dynamic with you where it's kind of like a big brother, little brother thing, and they feel like you're their buddy, which, by the way, anytime somebody, especially in the workplace, calls me buddy, I fucking cringe because it feels inherently patronizing. But I feel like there's often this dynamic where almost like they put you in this place where they feel that you're subservient to them or something. Again, like a little brother, big brother dynamic. Like, they're cool with you, but as long as it's like on their terms. So again, these are subtle things. These are not huge overt things. But when I look back, like, this was demonstrative of the bigger issue for me at every company that I've been, which is that there were just issues at the top with the management culture. And last night in the bath, I realized that part of it was this dynamic of like this boys club of white straight men running things according to their own lens and perspective. And and having no awareness beyond that. And I only really gathered this last night thinking about it, like, oh wow, that was a big piece of it. I just always thought it was like these assholes running the show, and I'm now realizing that I'm sorry, but that culture, like white privilege and the white straight man or even white straight women, like that's a part of the reason that every time I've left a job, I've left. I didn't realize that on the surface, but I'm realizing now that that always played a part. So fast forward, the next company, and the last full-time job that I had, I worked from home. I had all these great perks or whatever, but it's funny how you can work from home and still sort of see what's happening with office dynamics and still somehow get caught up in like the nonsense of it. And at this job, I will say that nothing happened to me that I know of as a result of being gay, like those other examples I just mentioned. But I think when you are gay, just like being part of any minority group, you kind of have like this third eye. Why am I pointing here? Third eye, where you see things from a different perspective, like as an outsider. And I think something maybe that I tend to notice more that maybe the average straight guy, I'm assuming, wouldn't notice as clearly is the way that men treat women in the workplace. By the way, I'm the first to admit I've been in situations where I've heard and seen women complain about things that I was like, this has nothing to do with your gender. This is just because you are a bitch or you're unprofessional or that guy is just unprofessional. Like this has nothing to do with gender. So I'm the first to admit it's not always about race. It's not always about sexuality. It's not always about gender. But I have had moments where I'm like, I can't believe this is happening and this is so inappropriate. That's what I want to talk about with this next example. So this last company that I worked for, literally a few months into the job, they were hiring somebody, they were looking for somebody to join my team. And I knew this girl that I thought was the perfect candidate. She was a part of this business, social media, influencer world, whatever. So I thought, she's been in this business. I know her, I like her, I think she's smart, she's professional, like she's a great fit, right? So I refer her to the company and they're like, yeah, anybody you refer we'll pay attention to, blah, blah, blah. She calls me within 5 minutes of interviewing and she was like, what the hell just happened? I feel so uncomfortable. And I'm like, what happened? She told me that my boss at the time, my manager, within like 10 minutes of the interview was like, yeah, I don't know if you're the right, oh, and I have to bring up this note. She's really hot. Like really, really fucking hot. Like hot in a like, I guess like a Playboy kind of way. Like body, face, like she just has this raw sex appeal. So she calls me and she's like, within 10 minutes, meaning my boss at the time, essentially in so many words was like, yeah, I don't know if you're the right fit for this position, but you know, we're really looking for somebody to host our new like ads and videos and content to put on social media, and we think you'd be great for it. Like you could totally be like a great host. And she felt insulted, rightfully so, because here's this like career woman who's used to 6-figure salaries. She has a mortgage, like she's a career woman in her 30s, and she was kind of reduced to like this role of like video girl. And you know, if you're straight out of high school or you're in college, you might be more enticed by that. Like, oh yeah, cool, like I'll do some videos, make some cash on the side. But she's like looking for the next step in her career. So I'm totally embarrassed that I referred her to my company and that this is how the interview went. And to me, that was just like blatant sexism and objectification. Like here she is with all these credentials and I've brought her your way, and she was reduced to this idea within 10 minutes of like, oh, you could be our video host girl, when that has nothing to do with the job that was presented to her. So I was totally embarrassed and I struggled with it. I was like, do I bring this up to HR? And then I was like, I've just been here for 2 months. I work from home. Almost nobody else works from home at this company. I don't want to be that guy that like 2 months in is like starting to report things to HR. Not to mention, this is my direct boss. This isn't like some other guy at the company or some person that I've interacted with once at the company. This is my direct boss. Like, and at that time, the team was literally me. At that time, it was literally me and just him. So it's like, what am I going to do? But I remember thinking, this is important. If something else happens on this level, like you have to bring it up. If ever HR starts bringing up like sexism talk, you have to bring this up. And at the very least, you have to discuss this before you leave this company. Whenever that day comes, you have to discuss this with HR. It's like your duty. So anyway, fast forward to like 6 months later, and they decide to hire again on the team. And it was between two candidates at the end. So they brought our team in to like assess the two candidates to see like who would be more of like a culture fit and blend in with the team, whatever. And it was these two female candidates. One of them, I would say, she wasn't like super, super hot or anything like that, like my friend that I just mentioned. But she did have, and it's funny that as a gay person, like I'm not attracted to this, but I can still pick up on it. She had this like natural allure, you know, just this kind of way of moving. It's in the mannerisms, it's in the body language, like flirty without trying, kind of like like this is so silly, but she reminded me of like a sexy librarian, just like talking like this and like, yeah, and da 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 da. For me, you know, I don't fall to that spell because I'm not interested in women, so it doesn't matter to me. But I could feel that she was one of those women who her whole life has known that she has this power and that she kind of like knows how to captivate men. The other candidate was obese and just in general not very like image conscious. So just keep this in mind, okay? The girl who was obese had completely relevant experience and I think was the only person that had ever been considered for a role on that team other than me who actually had completely direct relevant experience. And she was also enthusiastic about the role and it was just a more solid and more like stimulating interview. The other girl, the girl that had that like, you know, allure, we'll call it, it was not a good interview. There were a few red flags, like just kind of a few things that she said that I thought were weird. For example, she said towards the end of the interview, like, you know, how was it for you? Like, you know, do you feel that I'm the right fit? And like, if not, like why? And you know, we all have insecurities and we all wonder like how we've done after an interview, but I thought it was strange that she brought that up during the interview and that she was like looking for feedback during the interview. And it's funny because on that team, it was all straight white girls, except for our boss, who was a straight white man, and his boss, who was also a straight white man. Everybody, straight white people except for me and one other guy who was also gay. And it's so funny because after the interview with that girl, he called me and he was like, that was really weird, right? Like that was a weird interview. She's not the right fit. And I was like, absolutely. Like, thank you for confirming what I felt. The other girl is clearly way more right for this role. And he completely agreed. We gather as a team to talk about these two candidates. And I was shocked that the two straight white men in leadership positions, one of whom, by the way, was the CFO of the company. And I'm like, why is he involved in this decision making? He's not going to be working with her on a daily basis. We are, and we know the dynamics of our team. Like, why is he getting involved? But he was adamant that we hire her. And it was so strange. It was like Twilight Zone because me and the other gay guy were like, guys, this doesn't make sense. Like, this girl has, the other girl has way more experience. She seems enthusiastic. She seems to really want it. She seems more professional. The other girl, honestly, there was no merit. Like, the interview was kind of off. She didn't really seem to care about the role. It was kind of obvious to me that she just needed a job and just happened to kind of show up. And the other girls on the team, it's funny because they were all kind of on the fence. Like, they just didn't really care. And they were like, oh, both could probably do a good job. But, like, they weren't really sold. They didn't care one way or another. It was me and the other gay guy who were, like, passionate about giving this girl who had the credentials this opportunity. And the two straight white men in the leadership positions were like, no, we're going to go with the other girl. We just think she's a better fit. And again, the gay guy called me after and was like, you saw what just happened, right? And I'm like, yeah. Like, I hate to reduce a candidate to this, but it really honestly felt like the only reason that she was hired was because of her physicality. Like, nothing else made sense. She just was not the right fit. And I remember talking to a few of the female coworkers afterwards too, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of obvious to us too that this was like a physicality thing. It wasn't, by the way, the first time that had happened, that a candidate had been hired who was clearly not a good fit, professionally speaking, but was really, really beautiful. So it's funny that like all the little people on the team kind of saw what was happening, but as long as the people at the top are making the decisions, this kind of culture can't change, right? And who was right? In the end, the girl that I just mentioned that I said this had happened before, she was fired within, I think, about a year because she was just incompetent. And the girl they hired instead of the candidate who was more qualified, I would say within I think like 3 months. So many HR violations, like weird shit. She just wouldn't show up to work. She had all these weird excuses. And then something very controversial happened that they never told us like the details of, but apparently it was like sexual harassment related, that she was like doing weird shit with like management, people in management, including our boss. And apparently she told our gay coworker that she knew that our boss wanted to sleep with her and that she would use her, like, essentially her sexuality to her advantage in this role. And again, like, me and this gay coworker, as gay men, we were disgusted that like this was taking place, and that this happened because of her physicality, and that this other great candidate was rejected because of her physicality. And we were right the whole time. This girl got fired under very strange, controversial circumstances. And who did they hire to replace her? Within a month, they went back to the drawing board and hired the girl who really should have gotten the role in the first place, who's still there, by the way. And she's one of the only people remaining from the original team who didn't quit or wasn't fired. So, yet another example, right? And of course, this has nothing to do with my experience, like being treated a certain way as a gay person, but I just feel like this is something that as a gay person, I'm very aware of like how straight men conduct themselves in the workplace. Finally, months later, it was the same kind of shit, just weird stuff that didn't feel okay with the way that female clients this time the relationships were handled. I finally went to HR. Other people on the team, other women on the team had gone to HR to make complaints, and I finally joined, and I was like, enough's enough. Here's this thing that happened a year ago when I first started that I didn't want to bring up because I didn't want to be that guy, but you guys need to know all this is happening. HR sounded very concerned. Nothing happened. I think they probably got a little slap on the wrist, these people in upper management. Nothing changed, and I was like, my ethics have to come first, and I quit because I was like, I don't want to be associated with a company like this. I felt like, who knows, 6 months from now, something crazy could happen, in terms of press, and this kind of thing could get exposed. And I don't want to be associated with this kind of company that has this sort of like moral compass or business ethic or way of doing business. And to me, when HR doesn't step up to something that they should, that's like a dead giveaway that you have to just leave and that it's not the right environment. And it's shocking to me that this was all like post Me Too movement. It was during Me Too movement / the waning of the Me Too movement, press coverage, and that like this was still happening. That's what's so crazy to me, and that's the hypocrisy of it all, that we have these discussions and there's this public dialogue and there's protests and all this stuff, but like life goes on and these corporations go on, and as long as people at the top are still running the show with the old school culture, this stuff just doesn't change. So that brings me back to my original point that, yeah, it's great for these legal, milestones to take place, but it doesn't actually mean that the culture shifts. It does mean that it's a start, and that's always great. So I don't want to be, like a Debbie Downer and be like, oh, well, this doesn't really mean anything. But it's so important, I think, for us to have these conversations about like the nuances of it all. And again, looking back at my bath last night, this was kind of an epiphany for me, realizing that this was actually a key element in me leaving these companies. Each time that I left, I've been self-employed for the past year, and now I'm in this weird spot where, honestly, the last year has been, I've survived, I managed, and I did better than breaking even over the past year, but it was tough, and I hustled, and it's not fun to always worry about money, especially when I was in such a position of privilege with the last role, where all these things were happening that I mentioned. I was so like, not only financially stable, but like super comfortable and privileged. And it sucks that you have to have this like moral dilemma of like, well, is it about my selfishness as a person or like my ethics? Like, what matters more to me? And I had to weigh that, and I decided I want to be a free agent and not be associated with what I consider a toxic culture. And so I finally left. And I had moments where I regret it because it's been tough the past year, and now I'm basically 99% sure I'm going to go back to full-time work very soon, and I'm weighing my options. I have this like trepidation because I know with these old school office politics are like, and I so want to be removed from it. But I tried for a year. I did the self-employed thing, and it looks like it's probably not going to go on for much longer. And it sucks that we so many times have to choose between like what we stand up for values wise and just like surviving in society and needing to pay for your rent and pay for your food and think about your future. But anyway, this was a long rant. As always, curious to hear what you guys think about all this stuff. But again, I think it's important, and it's good that we're more so now having these dialogues, and that, you know, I just read a headline this morning that somebody from ABC News, higher up, an executive, got fired because she said racist comments. And left and right, these past few weeks, people keep getting fired because they're getting caught for things they said years ago. And although I think, again, I noticed the hypocrisy of it, that like, okay, they said this years ago, why weren't you calling them out then? Like, why didn't you do a background check then? I'm aware of the hypocrisy that these people are just getting fired because these companies don't want to be in hot water. I don't think they're really doing it because of ethics. But at least it's proving to like the old school people at the top, like, you can't get away with this anymore. Like, we will find you, we will catch you. So that's the beauty of it all. I mean, I hate to celebrate people losing their jobs, but when I think of these experiences that I've had and things that I've noticed, we need to change the culture. And the beautiful thing is, I feel like my generation is like, enough is enough. We're not wearing suits to work every day. We're not doing this like old school corporate nonsense anymore. And we will leave your companies and do our own thing and start our own companies, our own startups, our own multi-million-dollar companies if you guys don't change this system. Like, we don't want to be a part of the legacy that you've left behind, where you've screwed us over now multiple times in terms of, you know, the American economy. This is now the second time that my generation and the generation after are just getting royally screwed by the fuck-ups of the former generation. So I think all this is great that we're having these discussions and that we're seeing change, but it really needs to happen even more quickly, and there needs to be even more changes, in my opinion. Again, love to hear what you guys think.